The rain tapped a quiet rhythm against the glass walls of the penthouse as the city of Manhattan shimmered far below in a wash of silver lights. It was 1 to 17 in the morning, a time when most of the world slept, yet inside the 70-floor sanctuary of Elias Ward, the atmosphere carried a tension that felt almost alive. Maya Hart pushed her cleaning cart across the polished marble with soft and steady movements. Night shift work had trained her to exist like a whisper. She made no sound she did not need to make, and she never spoke unless spoken to. She moved with the kind of caution born from years of surviving environments where loudness meant danger. The penthouse was mostly dark except for a dim strip of warm gold light spilling from the half-open door of Elias' office. Maya assumed he was still working because he was always working. Every night she arrived, and every night he remained untouched by rest. Tonight she felt a heaviness in the air she could not explain. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the quiet ache that sometimes crept into her chest when she looked out over a city too big to notice someone like her. She lifted a tray of crystal glasses from the bar counter and turned toward the sink. One step slipped on the wet edge of a tile she failed to see. The tray tilted. The crystal fell. The sound shattered through the penthouse like a gunshot. The moment it echoed, Maya froze. A spike of fear clamped her lungs. She had been yelled at for far less in her old life, and the instinct to brace for impact flared through her without mercy. She whispered a shaky apology even before she knelt to gather the shards. Before she could reach the first piece, a shadow moved fast along the hallway. Elias Ward appeared from the office doorway like a man pulled from a nightmare. His usually composed posture bent inward as if he were bracing for a blow. His face drained of color, his eyes wide, sharp, and trembling. He took one step back, then another. His breath broke in uneven fragments. Maya lifted her hands slowly so he could see they were empty. She did not speak. She knew better than to speak too quickly, too loudly, too soon. But Elias stared at her as if her words might crush him anyway. His voice came out cracked thin, almost unfamiliar even to himself. "Please, do not raise your voice." Maya blinked, confused. She had not raised it. She had barely used it. But Elias looked at her the way a wounded animal looks at a hand reaching toward it, not knowing if it intends help or harm. "Please," he repeated softer this time, almost a plea. "Do not raise your voice. I have not been loved in years." The words spilled from him unguarded and raw, as though they had been trapped behind his ribs for a lifetime, and something about the shattering glass had torn the lock open. Maya felt every part of her still, not with fear, but with something colder, something heavier, something that whispered this man is hurting in a way no one sees. Elias dragged a hand across his face, but a tear slipped through his fingers anyway. He turned away quickly as if ashamed for being seen cracked open even for a second. Maya spoke only when she felt her voice steady enough not to frighten him. "I am not angry, Mr. Ward. It was an accident. I am sorry about the glasses." He did not answer. He kept his back to her shoulders, tight breath shallow. Maya could sense the storm inside him was louder than the one outside. She rose carefully, avoiding the shards. She felt the urge to step closer to reassure him, but her experience told her not to approach someone in pain too suddenly. Pain like his had edges. Pain like his had memory. Instead, she stayed still, giving him the space he seemed desperate for. The rain outside thickened, turning into a low, rolling thunder that carried across the glass. Elias finally inhaled a full breath, then another, as if trying to pull himself back into the present moment. When he turned, his face remained guarded, but his eyes flickered with something fragile, something terrified, something lonely. Maya held his gaze for just a second. It was enough to understand what his silence was saying, that he was apologizing for reacting, but did not know how to form the words. She nodded gently, acknowledging what he could not speak. Elias brushed the tear from his cheek swiftly and stepped backward toward his office. His voice steadier now, but faint. "I did not mean to frighten you." Maya shook her head softly. "You did not. But they both knew he had not been speaking about her fear. He had been speaking about his own, and she had seen it. The door to his office closed with a muted click. The storm deepened. The city glowed. Maya stood alone beside the fallen shards, thinking only one thing. What kind of life makes a man so powerful, yet so afraid of a raised voice? Elias Ward entered the world already surrounded by noise. His father, a decorated military officer, believed discipline was forged through volume. Orders were shouted, meals were commanded, routines were barked, and silence was considered weakness. Even as a child, Elias learned to shrink himself to survive the blasts of anger that filled every corner of their home. His mother, the only gentle presence, died when he was 12, and the house that already echoed grew even quieter inside, yet louder around him. Grief shifted his father into something harsher, something brittle, something always one sound away from shattering into rage. The older he grew, the more Elias learned to anticipate the storm before it arrived, the tightening of a jaw, the sharp turn of a shoulder, the inhale that came before the verbal strike. He became a master of slipping into silence, the kind of silence that protected him, the kind that made him invisible, the kind that taught him being unseen was safer than being heard. When he turned 18, he left for Seattle with nothing but an acceptance letter to a state college and the fragile hope that somewhere beyond his childhood there might be air he could finally breathe. At school, he discovered a mind built for patterns, logic, and complexity. Algorithms made sense. People did not. He spent nights in the library surrounded by coding manuals and cheap vending machine snacks. He took extra shifts at the campus computer lab to avoid going back to the dorms where roommates argued over video games and girlfriends and bills, their raised voices sending cold needles through his spine. In silence, he thrived. In noise, he fractured. By 26, he launched his first program, a predictive system that caught the attention of venture capitalists. By 32, he built Ward Dynamics, an artificial intelligence company that revolutionized how corporations understood data. By 35, he became one of the wealthiest men in America and the youngest self-made billionaire in Washington state. Reporters flocked to him, branding him the Glass King, because of the transparent structures of his skyscrapers and the polished perfection of his image. They described him as brilliant, unreachable, impossible to read, a man carved from ice. But they never saw him recoil during interviews when a journalist raised his voice in excitement. They never noticed how he kept boardrooms soundproof, regulated his staff to speak at a measured volume, avoided televised debates, and declined every invitation to events where crowds roared. Money gave him power, but power did not give him safety. He lived above the city in a penthouse of glass and metal because the height made him feel far enough away from the world to survive it. People had expectations, and expectations became pressure, and pressure created noise. He worked through nights to avoid meetings that made him anxious. He climbed stairs instead of taking elevators crowded with chatter. He answered emails instead of phone calls. Silence was the only thing that did not ask anything from him. Yet, even silence could hurt when it stretched on too long. His assistants never lasted more than a few months. They spoke too loudly, shut drawers too hard, dropped documents on his desk with careless thuds. He dismissed them gently, never cruelly, but always with the same explanation. You deserve an environment where you can thrive. They thought he was polite. They never realized he was terrified. When the penthouse building recommended Maya Hart for night maintenance, he accepted without looking at her file. The manager had said, "She is quiet." That was all he needed. The first time she stepped inside the penthouse, Elias watched from the shadow of the hallway. She moved with steady, measured motions, almost as if she too understood what it meant to make herself soft in a world that could be unbearably loud. She never slammed a door, never dragged a chair, never startled him with sudden footsteps. She breathed like someone trained to keep peace around her. He found himself lingering in rooms longer when she entered, staying closer than necessary just to observe how gently she handled everything she touched. It was not attraction at first. It was recognition. She carried an aura he had not seen before, something calm, something steady, something that made the air feel less sharp. He owed her nothing, yet he waited for her shifts without admitting he was waiting. He listened for the quiet glide of her cart across the floor, the subtle tap of her shoes, the sigh she sometimes let out when she thought no one could hear. He noticed details he wished he did not: her worn-out sneakers, her frayed sweater sleeves, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she pressed her palm to her ribs as though steadying herself from an invisible bruise. She did not know that on nights she hummed under her breath he relaxed just enough to work one more hour without feeling the weight of his chest tightening. She did not know that her presence made the penthouse feel less like a museum of expensive loneliness. But the truth was simple. With Maya there, quiet did not feel empty anymore. It felt shared. The night she dropped the tray, Elias had not meant to frighten her. The sound had clawed through his nerves, pulling him back into memories he had never outrun. For a second, he had seen his father instead of a tray. For a moment, he had felt 12 again. Small, powerless, waiting for the explosion. The words he spoke had never been intended for her. They were for the ghosts that still lived inside him. Please do not raise your voice. He had not realized they escaped until he saw Maya freeze, as though she was the one who had been asked to survive a storm she did not create. And when he told her, "I have not been loved in years," it was not meant to be a confession. It was simply the truest thing inside him breaking open. He did not know yet that the woman who heard those words was the first person who might understand them. Maya Hart had learned long before arriving in Manhattan that silence could be a kind of armor. Growing up in a small town outside Portland, she was the older sister by 10 years to a boy who entered the world with fragile kidneys and a smile too bright for a life filled with hospital beds. Her mother worked double shifts at a diner, her father left before she turned 14, and Maya stepped into responsibility too early and too heavy. She learned to heat canned soup, pack school lunches, help with homework, and manage the endless appointments at the pediatric wing long before she ever learned to enjoy anything meant for herself. She never complained. There was no one to complain to, and even if there had been, she would have swallowed it. The world responded better to her quiet than her pain. When she reached her 20s, she tried to build a life of her own. She enrolled in a social work program, hoping one day she could help kids like her brother. For a moment, she felt the possibility of having a future where she did not have to choose between survival and purpose. Then she met Daniel. He was charming at first, funny, attentive, protective in ways she mistook for love. But his voice changed over time. It sharpened, raised, controlled. The first time he yelled, she froze and apologized instinctively, though she had done nothing wrong. The second time, she cried. The third time, she learned to close her throat and keep still until it was over. Silence became her defense again. She finished classes during the day, worked nights at a call center, and tried to balance the life she wanted with the life she had been handed. But when her brother collapsed at school, and the medical bills spiked beyond anything she could manage, Daniel did not comfort her. He shouted until her hand shook so badly she could not hold her phone. She ended it that night. He called her weak. She knew he was wrong, but the echo stayed. She dropped out of school to save money for her brother. She took the first job she could find cleaning offices downtown. It was not the future she dreamed of, but it was the one she could afford. Every month, she sent most of her paycheck to her mother to cover medication. Every week, she picked up extra shifts. Every day, she carried guilt for not being able to give her brother more. By the time she moved to New York at 29, she had become the kind of woman who kept her head low, walked with measured steps, and spoke only when absolutely necessary. She found comfort in predictability and routines in the quiet work that did not require emotional exposure. But New York was not kind to women who tried to disappear. Her first job in the city was at a luxury hotel where the manager barked orders like a drill sergeant. Her second was at a restaurant where the kitchen noise made her flinch so visibly a coworker asked if she was okay. She lied. Her third job was at the skyscraper where Elias' penthouse sat. The building supervisor studied her during the interview and said, "You are calm, silent, steady. The CEO likes steady." She did not understand what that meant until she saw Elias Ward for the first time walking through the lobby. He moved with a stillness that looked almost artificial, like someone taught himself not to startle. His eyes darted subtly whenever a loud noise cracked through the hallway. His jaw tensed when the elevator dinged too sharply. She recognized the signs. She had lived with someone who reacted to the world that way. But Elias was not dangerous. He looked haunted. Her job was simple: clean the penthouse during the night hours, respect his space, avoid unnecessary noise. She excelled without trying. On her first shift, he barely acknowledged her. He passed her in the hallway with a nod, and she lowered her eyes automatically, not wanting to impose. For weeks, they lived like two planets orbiting the same silence. She wiped down marble counters while he typed behind his closed office door. She vacuumed carpets on low suction so the sound would not disturb him. She rearranged books that he left half open with quiet care. She never asked why he stayed awake until dawn, because she understood that some questions were small knives disguised as curiosity. One evening, she saw him sitting at the dining table untouched dinner in front of him, both hands gripping the edge of the chair. She did not interrupt, but when she turned away, she heard the faintest exhale, like someone drowning, finally breaking the surface. She left a cup of chamomile tea near him without making eye contact. He stared at it for a long time before taking the first sip. The next night, he nodded at her a little softer. Slowly, she began to notice the rhythms of him. The way he touched his temple when he was overwhelmed. The way he closed his eyes when trying to regain control. The way he avoided standing near windows during thunderstorms. The way he tensed when distant sirens wailed. She recognized patterns, and yet she never pushed, because pushing was the one thing she feared doing to another human being. Pressure turned people into versions of themselves they regretted. She knew that firsthand. In Maya, Elias saw something he could not name. A woman who moved like calm water. A presence that softened air instead of breaking it. He did not know her story, but he felt its shape in the quiet moments between tasks. He noticed her small winces as she stretched her back, the faint shadows under her eyes, the determined set of her shoulders. He wondered why someone with her gentleness carried exhaustion like armor. She wondered why someone with his power carried fear like a second spine. The night she dropped the tray, she expected to be scolded as she had been so many times before. But she was not prepared for what happened instead. She saw a man unravel just from the sound of breaking glass. She saw a childhood wound surface like a bruise pressed by accident. She saw vulnerability so raw she felt her own chest tighten, as if something inside her was responding to a familiar call. When he said, "I have not been loved in years," she believed him. Not because of the words, but because of the way they escaped him, like a confession he had never intended to reveal. She left the penthouse that night not thinking about broken glasses or overtime paperwork. She thought about Elias and the storm behind his eyes. She thought about how two people could come from different worlds and yet carry the same quiet scars. She thought about how loneliness sounded the same no matter who you were. But what stayed with her the most was the tremble in his voice and the truth hidden inside it. He was not afraid of her. He was afraid of being hurt again by a world that had never learned how to speak to him gently. And, without realizing it, Maya felt something shift inside her. Not attraction, not yet. Something deeper, a recognition of another soul who flinched at the same shadows. The next few nights unfolded with a softness Maya had not expected, and a steadiness Elias did not know he needed. After the incident with the shattered crystal, something unspoken hung between them. Not tension, but awareness. A gentle acknowledgement that each had seen something fragile in the other, and neither chose to turn away. On Monday night, Maya entered the penthouse carrying her usual supplies, but paused as she saw Elias sitting on the floor near the glass wall surrounded by stacks of documents. His suit jacket lay discarded on the couch. His sleeves rolled past his elbows, and his posture slumped as if the weight of every decision made that day had finally pressed him to the ground. She remembered the slight tremor in his voice, the night the tray fell, remembered the way he clutched the edge of the table in the boardroom, remembered the unfamiliar break in a man who otherwise lived like a sculpture carved from restraint. Without a word, she filled a kettle in the kitchen and searched the pantry until she found ginger tea. She prepared a mug, brought it to him, and set it down beside his papers with the quietest motion she could manage. Elias looked up startled as though dragged from a faraway realm, then slowly shifted his gaze to the mug. He blinked, as if unsure whether he was allowed to accept something given so freely. He touched the warm ceramic with tentative fingers, and for a moment his breath steadied. "Thank you," he said quietly. And there was something in his tone that made Maya feel as though she had just offered him far more than tea. The next night, the city suffered a sudden power outage caused by a storm sweeping past the coast. The entire penthouse fell into darkness except for the lightning that flickered like distant camera flashes across the skyline. Maya stood near the stairwell waiting for the emergency lights to click on, but they did not. She felt her heartbeat climb the way it always did when trapped in silence too deep, too still, too reminiscent of the moments before someone lost control. Then she heard footsteps approaching, and Elias emerged holding a small battery lantern. It cast a warm glow between them, making the penthouse feel strangely intimate. He wordlessly gestured for her to follow him toward the massive floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the darkened city. They sat side by side on the cool marble tile, the lantern between them like a small sun. Manhattan stretched out in shadows dotted by only a few stubborn lights that refused to die. "It is quieter than I have ever seen it," Maya murmured softly. Elias nodded. "The world feels gentler when it is forced to hush." His voice held a rare ease. They spoke little, but the silence between them did not feel heavy. It felt shared. After almost an hour, the lights flickered back on and the moment dissolved, but something inside it remained. On Wednesday, Elias prepared to leave for an early meeting and struggled to fix his tie in the reflection of the glass wall. Maya passed through the room on her way to clean the kitchen and paused. "The knot is uneven," she said, barely above a whisper. Elias stared at the tie, unsure whether to remove it or ask for help, until Maya stepped closer, her movements calm and precise. "May I?" she asked, and he nodded. Her fingers brushed the fabric lightly, adjusting, smoothing, guiding the silk with a practiced gentleness. Elias held still, as if any sudden motion might break the fragile peace this moment created. When she finished, the tie lay perfectly centered. "Thank you," he said again in that same quiet tone that held more emotion than he intended. That evening, he returned the gesture in his own way. Maya stepped onto the balcony to shake crumbs from a cloth, and a cold gust hit her unexpectedly, making her shiver. Before she could retreat inside, Elias appeared behind her holding a gray cashmere sweater draped over one arm. He did not speak. He simply offered it. She hesitated, then slipped it on, feeling warmth spread across her shoulders and something else settle deeper under her ribs. By Thursday, she noticed how he lingered near the edges of rooms she cleaned, not close enough to intrude, but close enough to be near. She noticed how he softened his voice when speaking to her, as if matching the quiet rhythm she used with him. She noticed how he watched her hands when she worked, how he subtly mirrored her slow, controlled breaths when stress pressed too tightly against his chest. Neither of them called it connection. Neither of them dared name something so delicate, but the air around them had changed and both felt it. That night, Maya left something on his desk. It was a small wooden wind chime carved from cedar with 3 slender pieces hanging from a thin string. She placed it beside his computer with a note written in her careful small handwriting. "The sound is soft enough not to startle. Sometimes gentle noise is better than silence." She did not wait to see his reaction. She continued wiping down the shelves, pretending her heart was not thrumming with nervous energy. Elias entered the office moments later, expecting only paperwork and the glow of his monitors. When he saw the wind chime, he paused. He picked it up, turning it in his hands. The carved wood felt warm against his skin. A hesitant tap produced a faint hollow tone, delicate enough to calm the tightness in his chest. He stared at the note, rereading the lines until they blurred slightly. Maya did not see him bring the wind chime to his bedroom later, or how he hung it near his nightstand, or how he tapped it once before lying down as though it were a promise of safety. On Friday, she arrived to find the penthouse unusually tidy, as if Elias had attempted to clean before she came. He walked toward her with a subtle apology in his expression. "I tried to help," he said quietly. She smiled a little, the first genuine smile he had seen from her, and the sight caught him off guard. Without raising her voice, she said, "You do not have to try so hard, Mr. Ward. Sometimes doing less is enough." For reasons he could not explain, those words hit deeper than anything said to him in years. Over the course of that week, they developed a rhythm of exchanges, small, thoughtful, almost invisible to anyone else, but unmistakably intimate to them. She left tea. He left sweaters. She fixed his tie. He replaced the broken crystal glasses with ones that made softer sounds when handled. She placed the wind chime. He kept it near him every night. They did not touch except in accidental brushes of hands, but each accidental brush felt like a doorway waiting to be opened. They did not flirt. They did not lean toward romance. They simply existed beside each other in a way that felt like emotional gravity. Two quiet souls pulled into the same orbit not by desire, but by recognition. These small acts did not look like love from the outside. But to two people who had lived their lives avoiding loudness and longing, these quiet gestures were the closest thing to affection they knew how to give. And without realizing it, they were teaching each other something neither had understood until now. Love did not always begin with fireworks. Sometimes it began with silence made softer by someone else. The day everything changed began with the kind of morning that felt perfectly ordinary on the surface, the kind of morning that lulls a person into believing nothing unexpected could possibly happen. Elias arrived at Ward Dynamics dressed in a charcoal suit and a quiet tension he tried to hide beneath perfect posture. Maya arrived a few hours later carrying a stack of printed documents for the administrative floor. She rarely delivered anything directly to the office tower, but today the building supervisor was short-staffed and she offered to help. She did not expect to cross paths with Elias. She assumed he was already buried in strategy meetings and projections. In truth, Elias had barely slept. His company faced a crucial merger negotiation, and the board demanded updates that he was not ready to deliver. Numbers had shifted overnight. A partner had backed out. Every projection cost millions. He spent the morning trying to steady himself, but the pressure lodged beneath his ribs like a tightening cord. By the time the board meeting began on the 28th floor, his breathing felt shallow. Inside the conference room, the tension built quickly. Screens displayed graphs and losses. Investors frowned. Analysts whispered. At the head of the table, Elias spoke through a carefully measured tone, but his palms felt damp. Victoria Hale. The CFO stood across from him presenting revised financial forecasts. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. When she asked for clarification, Elias attempted to answer, but his throat closed halfway through the sentence. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Speak up, Elias," she said louder than necessary. The room stiffened. Several people lowered their gazes. Victoria had a reputation for pushing people to their breaking points. She viewed emotion as a flaw and weakness, as something to be smashed before it spread. Elias felt the room tilt. Her voice hit him like an echo from childhood, a command he had spent his entire adult life running from. His chest tightened. His pulse spiked. He heard the thunder of old memories rising, his father's voice booming like a monster from a locked room. He tried to breathe, but the air thinned. Victoria continued. "We cannot proceed with a leader who cannot answer simple questions. Say it clearly. Say it louder." The words cracked something inside him. His hands trembled beneath the table. His vision blurred at the edges. He swallowed, but the pressure in his lungs remained. Someone asked, "Are you all right, sir?" But the voices blended into a distant roar. Figures blurred. The room felt smaller walls pushing inward. He gripped the table to anchor himself. He felt the sound of his father's boots against old wooden floors smelled cold. Military polish tasted fear like metal on his tongue. He wanted the noise to stop. He needed it to stop. At that exact moment, the elevator doors opened. Maya stepped out onto the floor holding a folder of documents pressed to her chest, unaware of the storm brewing in the conference room just down the hall. She approached the glass doors and hesitated when she saw the tension inside. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on him. Elias was not composed. He was not calm. He was unraveling. His knuckles were white against the polished table. His shoulders hunched inward. His breathing shallow, fast, uneven. She recognized the signs immediately. She had seen panic before. She had lived inside panic before. She pushed the door open without thinking. Heads turned. Victoria snapped. Who let her in? But Maya ignored her. She crossed the room with steady footsteps. She set the documents down quietly and moved to the side of the table near Elias. He did not see her at first. His eyes were unfocused, locked somewhere far from the present. Maya very gently placed her hand on the back of his trembling one. The moment her skin met his, something in him jolted. Not from fear, but from recognition. He inhaled sharply, as if someone had handed his lungs back to him. His fingers curled toward hers, seeking steadiness without conscious thought. The room fell completely silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Even Victoria's clipped breath halted mid-sentence. Maya leaned closer and whispered just loud enough for him alone to hear, "Breathe. Slowly. You are safe." Elias closed his eyes. The world steadied by a fraction. The ghosts retreated enough for him to draw another breath, then another. Her hand remained on his light but grounding like a single warm thread, keeping him tethered to the moment. A full minute passed before his breathing returned to something closer to normal. He lifted his gaze and met hers. Relief washed through him like a quiet tide. He did not say thank you. He did not need to. His eyes said everything. Maya withdrew her hand gently, but her presence stayed like a shield between him and the rest of the world. One of the board members finally spoke. Should we reschedule the meeting, but Victoria, furious at being overshadowed, cut in no. We proceed. Elias straightened slowly. The tremor in his spine had not fully vanished, but the panic no longer owned him. He forced his voice steady. We will reschedule. Victoria opened her mouth to object, but Elias raised a hand. Not aggressively, simply firmly, and the room obeyed the shift immediately. The authority in him returned, but it was different now. Less rigid, more human. He stood, nodded to the board, and walked out. Maya followed a few steps behind in case he stumbled. As they entered the quiet hallway, he leaned a hand on the wall and exhaled as though shedding an invisible weight. She did not touch him this time. She simply stood near, offering the kind of presence she wished someone had offered her once. After several breaths, Elias finally spoke, voice rasped, raw. I am sorry you saw that. Maya shook her head softly. Do not apologize for being human. He met her gaze again, and for the first time he did not hide the fear beneath it. It terrified him to be seen. It terrified him more that being seen by her did not feel like danger. The elevator chimed faintly in the distance. He flinched. She noticed. She stepped slightly closer so the sound did not reach him as sharply. And for reasons he could not understand, he felt safer simply because she chose to stand there. The boardroom would later buzz with speculation about what they witnessed, about why the quiet night maid was the only one who could calm a man known for his icy composure. But in that moment, it was just the two of them in a hallway flooded with morning light, each realizing in different ways that something irreversible had shifted. Maya's world began to crack on a night that looked no different from any other. She arrived for her shift carrying her backpack and a tired smile from visiting her brother earlier that evening. He had been doing well for months until the doctor hinted that his kidney function had slipped again. The news gnawed at her quietly the way fear always did, not loud but steady and unyielding. She pushed her cart into the penthouse hallway and took a slow breath to steady herself before beginning her tasks. The lights were dim, the city glowing beneath the glass like a map of scattered stars, and the familiar silence wrapped around her like a thin blanket. She moved through the rooms, gently wiping surfaces and straightening pillows, grateful for the predictability of the work. Predictability kept her thoughts from spiraling. Around midnight, her phone buzzed. She rarely checked it during shifts, but something in her chest tightened, urging her to look. It was her mother's name on the screen. The message read simply, "Call me now." Her stomach dropped. She stepped into the laundry room and called. Her mother answered on the first ring, voice trembling. "Maya." "Honey, your brother collapsed. They're taking him to the emergency room." The floor seemed to tilt under her feet. She whispered, "I am coming," and hung up without another word. She grabbed her bag and rushed toward the elevator but stopped short. She could not leave without notifying someone. She hurried to the private hallway where the building's resident manager kept an overnight office. His name was Carl Doyle, a man with a permanent scowl etched into his face as if displeasure were the only expression he trusted. Maya knocked breathless. He opened the door with irritation already simmering in his eyes. "What do you want at this hour?" "My brother is in the hospital," Maya said quickly. "I need to go now." His expression twisted. "You cannot just leave. You have a job here. Someone else has to cover your shift." Maya shook her head. "There is no one else. I already asked earlier." Carl stepped toward her, raising his voice with every word. "You think your personal problems give you the right to abandon your post? Do you know how much this penthouse pays? Do you know how replaceable you are?" The hallway echoed with his cruelty. Maya felt the old familiar freeze spread through her chest. Her breath stuttered. "Not again?" Not another voice cutting through her like a blade. "I am not abandoning anything," she said quietly. "I just need a few hours." Carl smirked. "And who is going to clean up after your mess? You people always have excuses. You should be grateful you even have this job." The sting of those words hit deeper than she wished they would. People like her, replaceable, disposable, voiceless. She felt her hands trembling, but her voice remained steady. "Please, my brother is sick. I need to be with him." Carl leaned closer, towering over her. "If you walk out that door tonight, do not bother coming back." Maya swallowed hard, her throat burning. She had no choice. Family came before everything, even survival. She turned away and gripped the elevator button, trying to stop her hands from shaking. That was when another voice cut through the hallway. It was quiet, yet carried more weight than any shout. "She can go." Maya froze. Elias stood at the end of the hallway, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharp with something close to fury. He walked toward them, not with aggression but with purpose, every step controlled. Carl stiffened. "Mr. Ward, I was just explaining." He did not let him finish. "I heard everything." His voice remained low but firm. "And you will not speak to her like that again." Carl sputtered. "She is leaving her shift without permission. You cannot allow." He turned a shade paler as Elias stepped closer. "I will handle the hospital bills," Elias said simply. Maya's breath caught. She turned to him, shocked. Elias met her gaze steadily. "Go, Maya. Now." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The elevator opened and she stepped inside. Just before the doors closed, she saw Elias turn back to Carl, his posture still calm, but his voice edged with ice. "If you ever raise your voice at her again, consider your position here terminated." The doors slid shut. In the taxi, Maya held herself still, trying to stop the tears threatening to spill. She looked out at the passing lights of the city and realized something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. Someone had chosen to stand up for her. Someone had spoken quietly but fiercely on her behalf. At the hospital, everything moved in blurs of fluorescent lights and hurried nurses. She found her mother in the waiting room, and they held each other tightly. Her brother lay in a bed hooked to machines, looking small despite being almost 15. Maya brushed his hair back, whispering, "I am here. I am here. I am here," like a mantra to keep from falling apart. Hours passed. Doctors ran tests. Uncertainty hung in the air like heavy fog. At one point, Maya stepped outside the room to breathe. When she looked up, she saw Elias standing in the corridor. Her lips parted in surprise. "Mr. Ward," she whispered. What are you doing here?" He seemed unsure for a moment, his hands in his coat pockets, his posture stiff with unfamiliar vulnerability. "I wanted to make sure you were all right. You should not be alone during something like this." His voice was soft and cracked at the edges. Maya felt her throat tighten. "You did not have to come." He met her eyes. "I know. That is why I did." A nurse approached with an update, and Maya listened relieved when she learned her brother would stabilize after treatment. When she turned back, Elias was still there, silently offering presents rather than platitudes. She sank into a seat outside the room, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. Elias hesitated, then slowly sat beside her, keeping enough distance to avoid overwhelming her, yet close enough that she could feel his concern. For a long while, they sat in quiet. The chaotic sounds of the hospital faded around them, leaving only the faint hum of machines and the steady echo of footsteps down the hall. Eventually Maya spoke. "Why did you defend me like that?" Elias looked at his hands, startled by the question. "Because no one defended me when I needed it, and no one should ever have to face cruelty alone." Something inside Maya softened at the confession. She realized Elias's presence was not out of duty or obligation. It was a choice, and choices born from genuine care were rare in her world. She leaned her head back against the wall, closing her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. Elias did not reply, but she felt him exhale quietly as though relieved she did not push him away. For the first time in years, she did not feel entirely alone in a crisis. And for the first time in his life, Elias felt needed in a way that did not demand perfection, only presence. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the moment Elias began to fall in love long before he allowed himself to admit it. The night after Maya's brother stabilized, the sky above Manhattan stretched in a quiet slate blue, and the city lights flickered like distant thoughts drifting across the horizon. Maya returned to the penthouse just before midnight, exhausted but steadier, knowing her brother was safe for now. She did not expect Elias to be awake. She especially did not expect him to be waiting. When she stepped inside the penthouse, she found him seated at the far end of the living room, his posture rigid, his hands clasped tightly as if holding something fragile inside them. He looked up when she entered. His eyes carried a weight she had seen only once before, the night the crystal shattered, and his defenses fell with it. Maya set her bag down and approached slowly. "You should be resting," she said softly. "You spent the entire night at the hospital." Elias shook his head, gaze steady on her. "I needed to talk to you." Those words carried tension, as though speaking them had cost him effort. She came closer, but kept space between them out of instinct, giving him room to breathe. "Is something wrong?" He inhaled shakily. "Everything I said or did yesterday. I need you to understand it was not pity or responsibility. It was something else." Maya felt her pulse quicken. She sat across from him, hands folded in her lap. "Tell me." His eyes drifted to the floor as if the memories were easier to confront there rather than in her gaze. "I did not sleep last night. I kept replaying what happened with Carl. Every word he used, every tone. It was too familiar." Maya waited, sensing this was not something to interrupt. "When I was a child," Elias said slowly, "my father believed discipline was the only thing that built strong men, and he believed discipline required volume." His voice tightened. He shouted at everything, every mistake, every hesitation, every breath that was too loud or too quiet. There was no winning. Maya's heart twisted. She had expected something painful, but hearing it aloud changed the way she saw him. The rigid posture, the flinches, the cold silence masking deeper wounds. Elias leaned back against the couch cushions, his shoulders tense as if the memories pressed on them like a heavy hand. "I used to hide in my room. I pushed a dresser against the door just to feel like I had some kind of barrier. But even then, his voice broke through it. It felt like a force that lived in the walls." His gaze grew distant. I stopped speaking unless I absolutely had to. If I stayed quiet, maybe he would stop. Maybe he would tire. Maybe he would lose interest in breaking something that was already small. Maya's chest tightened at the subtle shaking of his fingers. She remembered that trembling from the boardroom, the way his breath had collapsed under pressure, the way a raised voice pulled him back into a past he never asked for. She spoke gently, and he never stopped, did he? Elias lifted his gaze to hers. No. He got quieter when I got older, but not because he changed. Because I learned to behave in ways that did not provoke him. I became invisible even in my own home. Every word he shared felt like an unspooled thread of his life unraveling onto the floor between them. Maya swallowed hard. I understand more than you think. Elias watched her carefully. Part of him feared she would run away from the truth. Another part feared she would move closer and he would not know how to handle that either. Maya continued in a soft voice threaded with her own buried memories. My ex used to yell too. Not like your father, but enough. Enough to make me walk on eggshells every second. Enough to make my body react to tone before I registered the words. Elias's breath hitched. That is why you do not raise your voice. Maya nodded. Silence was the only thing that kept things from getting worse, so I learned to fold myself small, quiet, manageable. She lowered her eyes for a moment. When you told me you had not been loved in years, it was not strange to me. It was familiar. Elias exhaled shakily as if relieved she did not find his confession absurd. Maya lifted her gaze again, and something warm flickered between them, mutual recognition growing like a small lantern in a long, dark hallway. Elias's voice softened. When Carl yelled at you, I could not stay in my office. I heard it, and I felt... He paused, searching for a word. Protective, she offered. He swallowed once. Yes, protective, but also afraid. Not of you, not of him, of what that tone could do to someone who did not deserve it. Someone like you. The room felt smaller, yet safer than before, a space where both truths could exist without shattering them. Maya leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. What happens when someone raises their voice at you? Elias hesitated. Then he answered with painful honesty. I freeze. My body remembers before my mind can catch up. My father created that. I have spent my whole life trying to outrun it. But noise, sharp noise, it always finds me. Maya nodded slowly. And you have been dealing with that alone. He looked at her as if she had said something impossible. Yes, always. You should not have to. The simplicity of her statement hit him harder than any therapy session or corporate victory. His shoulders dropped slightly as though her words gave him permission to let some invisible weight fall. I do not know how to fix it, he admitted. Maya spoke gently. Maybe you do not need to fix it alone. Maybe all you need is someone who does not shout. Someone who understands that quiet is not emptiness. It is safety. Elias stared at her, stunned for a moment by the depth of her understanding. He whispered, You make silence feel different. Less like a shield. More like... He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. Maya felt her breath rise and settle with unexpected heaviness. A quiet moment lingered between them like a held breath. Then she asked a question she had not planned to ask. Is that why you reacted the way you did when the glass shattered? Elias nodded, eyes distant. The sound was too close to memories I wish I could forget. And when you appeared, it felt like someone turned the noise down even before you spoke. She felt heat rise behind her eyes. The idea that she had eased his fear even briefly touched a part of her she kept locked behind years of survival. Elias spoke again, voice softer. There is something about your presence. It steadies me. I do not understand it, but I feel it. Maya placed a hand gently over her own heart as if steadying it. I feel it too. They held each other's gaze to two. People who had spent their lives shrinking for others finally finding space to breathe. In that moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them needed to. The truth had already moved for them. The viral twist began the way disasters often begin in the modern world, not with an explosion, but with a notification. It happened 2 days after the boardroom incident, a morning like any other except for the uneasy quiet settling over ward dynamics. Elias arrived early for meetings, unaware of the storm building online. Maya arrived for her shift at the tower to help with a temporary filing assignment, unaware that a 30-second video recorded by a board employee had set fire to the internet. The video showed the exact moment Maya placed her hand on Elias in the boardroom. It captured his trembling. It captured the way his shoulders collapsed inward. It captured her whispering something the microphone could not catch, but the world eagerly invented. And worst of all, it captured the stunned silence of everyone watching, including Victoria Hale, whose expression in the clip became the subject of 1,000 online jokes and 10,000 conspiracies. The caption read, "CEO melts down and needs maid to hold his hand," and the comments spread like gasoline dropped on a match. People reposted it with edits, slowed versions, dramatic music thrown underneath, and amateur psychologists giving loud opinions on trauma they knew nothing about. By the time the clip hit 1 million views, every news outlet in New York had seen it. By the time it hit 2 million, it had become part of a trending hashtag. Maya had no idea. She was pushing a cart through a quiet hallway when she noticed 2 interns staring at her before whispering and running off. She brushed it off as nothing. Then she noticed a woman from HR glance at her with something like pity. Another employee gave her a long look that felt invasive, almost judgmental. Maya kept walking, confusion knotting inside her chest. When she reached the filing room, Carl the supervisor approached, smirking with cruel satisfaction. "Congratulations, sweetheart. You are famous." Maya blinked. "What do you mean?" He held up his phone screen lit by the video, paused at the moment her hand rested on Elias. Her breath left her body in a sharp, quiet burst. Carl chuckled as if enjoying a private victory. "Looks like the boss has a weakness, and looks like you found yourself a shortcut to the top." Maya stared, frozen. "I helped him because he was having a panic attack." Carl shrugged. "Sure. The internet thinks otherwise." Maya felt her hands trembling. "I did nothing wrong." He leaned closer, voice oily. "The internet decides what is right, not you." Before she could respond, footsteps thundered behind them. Victoria Hale swept down the hallway in her sharp suit, her heels slicing the silence like blades. She stopped in front of Maya, her eyes filled with cold accusation. "You are causing a media crisis." Maya blinked once-twice, unable to process the words. "What?" Victoria shoved her phone into Maya's hands. The trending hashtag. The comments. The theories claiming she had manipulated Elias for influence, claiming she had seduced him, claiming she was a scheming maid climbing into the heart of a billionaire. Maya's face drained of color. "This is not true." Victoria's expression hardened. "Truth does not matter. Optics do." Maya tried to breathe, but each inhale felt thin. "I never wanted attention. I would never take advantage of him." Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You did this, whether you meant to or not. The board is furious. Investors are asking questions. And do not think for a second that Elias will take your side when his reputation is on the line." Maya swallowed the ache building in her throat. She wanted to defend herself. She wanted to scream that none of this was fair, but she knew better. She had spent a lifetime knowing better. She whispered, "He told me to stay close because he was afraid. He needed help in that moment." Victoria scoffed loudly enough for nearby employees to hear. "Of course he was afraid. Afraid of being exposed as weak, and you served him his downfall on a silver platter?" Maya shook her head quickly. "No, please do not twist this. I care about my work. I would never deliberately embarrass him." Victoria's eyes flashed with malicious satisfaction. "But you did. The internet thinks he depends on you. A janitor. A girl with no credentials, no influence, and no right to be anywhere near him. The humiliation pressed against Maya's ribs like something physically crushing. She backed up half a step, her breath catching in her throat. "I am not trying to ruin anything. I want to fix this. I will do whatever you need." Victoria smiled a smile so cold it made the air around them thin. "Good. Then stay away from him. Permanently." The sentence hit harder than she expected. Stay away from him. Permanently. As if she were a contaminant. As if her existence had damaged the fragile space she had begun to build with him. Maya felt her heart stutter. "Does he know about the video?" Victoria's lips curled. "Oh, he knows. And trust me, the last thing he wants is to see the woman who made him look weak in front of the entire world." The words were knives. Each one landed with perfect aim. Maya held her breath, still trying to stay composed. Suddenly, someone called out from behind them. "That her. She is the girl from the video." Maya flinched as the three employees slowed their pace to stare openly. One lifted his phone as if to record more footage. Maya took a step back, nearly bumping into her cart. "Stop," she murmured, though she knew they would not. The humiliation grew heavier, sharper, louder. She felt the weight of eyes on her like a punishment she had never earned. Carl smirked from across the hallway, enjoying the spectacle. Victoria crossed her arms, observing like a judge awaiting a verdict. Maya turned to leave, desperate to escape, when she heard whispers rippling behind her. Gold digger. Manipulator. He must be paying her. What a scandal. She kept walking, refusing to let them see her break. She reminded herself to breathe, to stay quiet, to stay small. But a new fear bloomed beneath her ribs. If Elias had seen the video, if he believed she had caused this, if he felt betrayed by her touch, then everything she had begun to feel, everything she had started to trust, everything that had softened in her around him might vanish in the space of a heartbeat. She stepped into the service elevator alone and pressed her forehead to the cold metal wall. Her chest tightened. Not the sharp panic from her past, but something softer and somehow worse, sadness. The world had twisted a small act of care into a spectacle, and now she was the villain in a story she never meant to write. She whispered to herself, voice trembling, "I did not mean to hurt him." But the elevator doors closed with a harsh metallic thud, almost as if answering, "You hurt him anyway." The fallout from the video spread through ward dynamics faster than wildfire, and by the next morning the company was a maze of whispers, suspicious glances, and hurried conversations behind closed doors. Maya did not return to the tower that day, choosing instead to stay home with her brother and avoid the eyes that now saw her as a scandal rather than a person. But trouble rarely waited for the unprepared, and hers arrived even without her presence. Victoria Hale moved with lethal precision. She had been waiting for an opportunity to take control of the company for months, and the video handed her the weapon she needed. One click of a keyboard, one manipulated narrative, and suddenly the board questioned whether Elias was stable enough to lead the upcoming merger. She visited each board member individually, wearing concern like a silk scarf and planting seeds of doubt with effortless cruelty. He froze in a meeting. He let a maid calm him instead of his own management team. He hid his weaknesses. He cannot be trusted with the biggest acquisition of our decade. And most importantly, she is still around him. Maya Hart, a liability, a public embarrassment, a distraction. Victoria's story spread through the upper floors until even those loyal to Elias began to wonder whether something inside him had broken. One board member finally said the quiet part aloud. If the CEO cannot maintain emotional composure in front of his subordinates, how will he manage a billion-dollar deal under international scrutiny? Victoria smiled inwardly. The plan was working. She had always known Elias's trauma would surface eventually. All she needed was the right moment to turn the world against him. But she needed more than doubt. She needed evidence, or the illusion of evidence. So she decided to frame the one person Elias would be unable to defend without compromising himself. Maya. She waited until late afternoon when the cybersecurity team left for the day. Using her clearance levels, she accessed a protected server containing early drafts of Project Helios, a confidential AI model valued at nearly $400 million. She transferred a copy to a restricted drive, then used Maya's outdated employee badge, which Carl had quietly turned over to simulate unauthorized access. The logs recorded it automatically. An employee with Maya's ID had downloaded proprietary files at 3 in the morning. A breach, a theft, a perfect crime. Victoria sat back in her chair admiring her work. The system now showed what she needed the board to see. The traitor was not her. It was the quiet maid whose hand had steadied the CEO. The timing was immaculate. Within an hour, HR escalated the issue to legal. Within 2 hours, the head of security notified the board. And by evening, the story spread through the company like smoke. Someone whispered, "She stole data." Another muttered, "She used him to get inside access." A third insisted, "This is why you never trust people who have nothing to lose." Elias returned to the building late that evening after a silent meeting with the board. He walked through the lobby exhausted, still unaware of the storm rising above him. His assistant rushed toward him, pale and shaking. "Mr. Ward, you need to come with me. There is an emergency." He felt dread settle underneath his ribs. What happened? She hesitated as though afraid to deliver the news. "It is about Maya Hart." Everything inside him froze. "What about her?" The assistant swallowed. "She has been accused of stealing Helios draft files." Elias stopped walking. For a moment the world felt too quiet, as if all sound had dissolved in shock. "That is impossible," he said calmly. "Run it again. The logs are wrong." But the assistant shook her head. "The logs show her badge was used. There is video of her entering the secure floor." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Show me." They led him to the security office where 3 managers stood hovering over a monitor. On screen was a grainy clip from a hallway camera. A woman wearing a custodial uniform similar to Maya's walked toward a restricted server room. Her face never turned to the camera, but her hair in a loose bun and petite frame made her resemblance unmistakable. Elias watched the clip twice, then a third time. Something was wrong. He leaned closer, staring at the posture that gave the motion. "That is not her," one of the managers frowned. "Sir, the badge used belongs to Maya Hart." Elias shook his head harder. "No, Maya walks lightly. She moves like she is trying not to disturb the space around her. This woman walks differently." He replayed the clip again. The woman's movement was too confident, too rushed. Maya never walked that way, but evidence, even false evidence, had its own voice, one the board trusted more than their own CEO. Elias stood still for several seconds, feeling a slow heat rise beneath his skin. Someone had set her up. Someone inside this building. And someone with access. His throat tightened as he realized exactly who had both the motive and the power to execute something so calculated. "Where is Victoria?" "In a meeting, sir." Elias left the room without another word. Meanwhile, across the city, Maya received a call from HR asking her to come in immediately. Her stomach twisted as she rode the bus toward the tower. She imagined clarifying the misunderstanding about the video. She did not imagine walking into a trap. When she entered the HR conference room, 3 people sat across from her wearing expressions carved from stone. "Miss Hart, you are under investigation for theft of confidential company property." Maya's breath stalled. "I did not steal anything. I have never even been to the secure floors." HR slid a printed sheet across the table. "This is your badge log. It shows you accessed restricted data at 3:17 a.m. Maya stared at the paper helplessly. "I was not even in the building at that time." "Please, you must have the wrong person." But the HR manager's voice remained flat. "Until we complete the investigation, your employment is terminated effective immediately." Maya's world tilted. Terminated. Her job gone. Her income gone. Her safety gone. The humiliation from the video was nothing compared to the devastation now crushing her. She tried to stand, but her knees wobbled. Before she could gather herself, 2 security officers escorted her out of the building without letting her collect her belongings. Employees gathered in clusters, whispering loudly as she passed. "That is her, and the girl from the video, the thief." She kept her head down, hiding behind her hair. Every step felt heavier than the last. She pushed through the revolving doors into the cold evening air, barely containing the panic rising in her throat. Her chest tightened, her breath turning shallow, but she forced herself to keep moving. She reached the sidewalk, gripping a lamppost to steady herself as tears blurred her vision. She whispered to the night sky, as if hoping someone would hear her, "I did not take anything. I swear I did not." In that moment, she wondered whether Elias knew, whether he believed any of this, whether everything between them had been so fragile that one lie could shatter it completely. And miles away in his office, Elias stared at the security footage with a scorching fury spreading through his veins. The truth settled inside him with chilling certainty. Maya had been framed, and someone was going to pay for it. He has left the security office with a storm inside him so sharp it made every sound in the building feel distant, muted, irrelevant. The hallways that usually felt sterile now pulsed with betrayal. His steps were steady, but the fury beneath them burned with every stride. He reached his office and slammed the door shut, not loudly, not violently, but with a forceful finality that echoed in the silence. His breath shook. Not from fear, not from panic, from rage. Someone had taken the one person who made his world quiet and twisted her into an enemy. Someone had stolen her dignity. Someone had made her cry. And Elias Ward had spent his entire life suffering in silence, but this was where the silence ended. He grabbed his coat and left, ignoring the calls of his assistant and the whispers trailing behind him. He strode through the lobby, jaw clenched, eyes locked forward. A few employees stepped aside, startled by an expression they had never seen on him: fierce, protective, unrestrained. Outside, the cold Seattle wind bit into his face, but he barely felt it. He pulled out his phone and dialed the only number he needed. Maya, pick up. The call rang, and then went to voicemail. He tried again, and again. No answer. His chest tightened. Not the familiar suffocating fear from childhood, the sharp, urgent fear born from caring about someone who might be hurting. Elias whispered to himself, voice trembling in a way he could not control. "I will find you." He didn't wait for a driver. He flagged down a cab, slid into the back seat, and said one word: "Hospital." The driver nodded and sped off, and the city blurred past in streaks of neon and rain. Every second without her tightened something inside him, a thread pulled to its breaking point. When he reached the hospital, he rushed through the glass doors, scanning the waiting area with a desperation he tried to contain. Nurses turned toward him, startled. A wealthy CEO barging into the ER was not an everyday sight. "I need to find someone." Maya Hart, a nurse, blinked. "She left an hour ago, left alone." She looked upset. The word upset hit him like a blow. Elias pressed a hand against the counter, his breath shaking. Did she say where she was going? The nurse shook her head. "I am sorry, sir." He closed his eyes. A memory flickered the night in the hallway when Carl yelled at her when she froze for a moment, as if bracing for impact. She would not have gone home. Not immediately. She would have gone somewhere quiet, somewhere small, somewhere she could breathe without being seen. The thought struck him suddenly. The park near the hospital. The one with the old wooden bench she once mentioned her brother liked because he could watch dogs run by. He turned and ran out of the hospital. Not walked, ran. Rain had begun to fall, cold and persistent. He barely noticed. He reached the park, breath fogging in the air, clothes sticking to his skin. The lamps cast dim yellow circles across the empty pathway. His shoes splashed through puddles as he searched one bench after another. Nothing. 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 And then he saw a small shape curled at the far bench under the largest tree, barely protected from the rain. Maya sat with her knees pulled to her chest hair, wet face, buried shoulders shaking in quiet tremors. No loud sobs, no gasps, just the silent collapse of someone who had already held too much for too long. Elias stepped toward her carefully, each breath shaking with relief and heartbreak. Maya. She didn't look up. He knelt in front of her, slowly making sure she saw his hands, palms open, not demanding, not controlling, just there. Maya, it is me. She lifted her head slightly. Her eyes were red, her cheeks streaked with rain and tears she tried to hide. She whispered in a voice so thin it nearly broke him, I did not do it. I swear I did not do it. He exhaled shakily, I know. She flinched as if the words themselves were too much. They said I stole something worth millions. They called me a thief, a manipulator, a stain on your career. Her voice cracked. Maybe I should have stayed away. A raindrop slid down Elias's cheek, but he didn't know if it was rain or something more fragile. He leaned forward, voice soft but unwavering. Maya, look at me. She hesitated before lifting her gaze. The pain in her eyes was sharp. Elias breathed in deeply. You did not ruin anything. You did not steal anything. You did not hurt me. Everything they said about you is a lie. Her throat tightened. How can you be so sure? Because you are the only piece I have left. Her breath stilled. He continued before she could look away. You think I do not see you, but I do. I see the way you move quietly because life taught you loudness leads to pain. I see the way you protect your brother without expecting anything in return. I see the way you carry the weight of the world without asking for help. And I see how you look at me not like a title or a paycheck or a scandal, but like a person. He swallowed. A person you do not want to hurt. Tears filled her eyes again. Elias reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he placed his hand gently over hers just as she had done for him in the boardroom. His touch was warm, steady grounding. Maya let out a trembling breath. They fired me, she whispered. I have nothing left. Elias shook his head. No, you still have me. The words slipped out before he could filter them, raw and trembling in the rain. Maya froze. Elias moved closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You saved me when I could not breathe. You held me together when I was disappearing inside myself. And now I will do the same for you. A faint rustle came from behind them. A nurse, stepping out for a break, accidentally dropped a clipboard. The noise, sharp sudden, made Maya flinch. Without thinking, Elias stepped in front of her, shielding her instinctively, voice low but firm. Please do not raise your voice at her. The nurse blinked, confused. I did not say anything, sir, but Elias had already wrapped an arm around Maya's shoulders, guiding her gently away from the noise. He realized what he had done, spoken the exact sentence he had once said in fear, but this time it came not from panic, but from protection. Maya felt something inside her shift. Lift. Understand. They stood there under the rain, soaked and shaking, but for the first time neither tried to hide their vulnerability. Elias whispered, Maya, you are not alone. Not now. Not anymore. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder, her breath warm against his collarbone. And for the first time in his life, Elias did not flinch. He simply held her the way he had always wished someone would hold him, gently, quietly, fully. In the middle of a cold Seattle night he found her, and without realizing it, she found him too. Morning broke over Seattle with a gray, reluctant light, the kind that felt neither warm nor cold, neither hopeful nor hopeless, but suspended somewhere in between. Elias Ward stood at the window of his 70-floor penthouse, staring out at the city as though searching for a version of himself he could no longer recognize. His clothes from the night before were still damp from the rain, his hair undone, his voice hoarse from speaking words he had spent a lifetime swallowing. Maya was asleep in the guest room, finally resting after a night of trembling heartbreak. He had insisted she stay not because he wanted to protect her, but because he could not bear the thought of her being alone after everything the world had done to her. He turned from the window and pulled out his phone. His fingers shook slightly as he typed. Emergency press conference. 10 a.m. Mandatory. He knew what he needed to do. He had avoided the spotlight for most of his life, hid behind glass walls and controlled environments, but silence had cost Maya everything. Silence could no longer be his refuge. It was time to speak. By 9:30, the Ward Dynamics auditorium filled with reporters, investors, analysts, and employees, all murmuring with restless curiosity. The viral video had pushed the company into a frenzy, but the leak and Maya's firing had turned the frenzy into chaos. Rumors flew in every direction. Some claimed Elias had suffered a breakdown. Some claimed he had entered a relationship with an employee. Some claimed he was stepping down. Victoria Hale sat in the front row, wearing a mask of professional composure, though her eyes gleamed with the anticipation of victory. She believed this emergency meeting would be the final proof the board needed to strip Elias of authority. She adjusted her blazer, crossed her legs, and prepared her accepting smile. She did not realize she was minutes away from the end of her career. Cameras flashed as Elias walked onto the stage. The room fell into an abrupt, uncanny silence. He looked different from the CEO the world knew, not polished, not untouchable, not the man they called the Glass King. He looked human, raw, steady, determined. He stepped up to the podium and let the silence settle before speaking. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." His voice carried an unusual gravity, quiet yet commanding, each word shaped with intention. "There is a matter that needs to be addressed with full transparency, a matter involving myself and an employee who has been wrongfully accused." Reporters leaned forward. Cameras clicked like soft, distant thunder. Elias continued. 2 nights ago, a video was leaked showing a moment in a boardroom meeting, a moment where I was experiencing a panic attack triggered by emotional trauma from childhood. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some leaned back stunned. Some leaned in sympathetic. Others simply watched, unable to look away. "I have lived with panic responses for many years," he said. "I have hidden them because I believed that was what leaders do. That vulnerability is weakness. That speaking about trauma makes you less trustworthy." He looked slowly across the room, letting his next words land like truth finally given sunlight. "I was wrong." Victoria shifted in her seat, suddenly uneasy. She had not expected him to approach the scandal head-on, especially not with such calm. Elias continued. "In that moment, the only person who helped me breathe again was Maya Hart. She approached me with kindness, with gentleness, with understanding. She did not manipulate me. She did not overstep. She saved me from collapsing in front of all of you." A few reporters stopped typing mid-sentence. The narrative they had prepared crumbled instantly. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a printed document. Yesterday, Maya Hart was accused of stealing confidential files. She was escorted out of the building without a chance to defend herself. He held the paper up. "This accusation is false." The room erupted. Reporters whispered loudly. Board members stiffened. Victoria's face remained controlled, but her fingers curled around her pen with a tremor she tried to hide. Elias waited for the noise to subside before speaking again. "Our internal investigation shows that her badge was used, but Maya was not in the building at the time. Camera footage was altered. Logs were manipulated. Access was granted by someone with higher clearance." Another wave of murmurs. Victoria's face whitened. One reporter called out, "Who had that clearance?" Elias looked directly at Victoria. "Our chief financial officer, Victoria Hale." The room froze. Then chaos snapped open like a shaken bottle. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed bright and relentless. Victoria rose to her feet, her voice sharp with false outrage. "This is absurd. You have no proof." Elias's voice remained quiet, calm, devastating. "Security will present the footage now." The screen lit up behind him, showing the unedited logs retrieved by the cybersecurity team Elias had called personally after finding Maya in the park. The footage showed a figure entering the restricted server room. Not Maya. A different gait, a different build, a different uniform. Then logs showing badge access overridden manually. Then a digital signature. Victoria Hale. The silence after the footage ended felt heavier than the walls themselves. 2 security officers stepped into the room. Victoria turned to run. She did not make it 3 steps. She hissed at Elias, "You are destroying yourself for a maid." Elias met her eyes with the calmness of a man who had finally found truth worth standing for. "No, I am protecting someone who never deserved to be hurt." As security escorted her out, the room erupted into whispers of shock and satisfaction. Elias turned back to the microphone. "And now, for the truth that matters most." The reporters leaned forward. Maya Hart is innocent. She has been publicly humiliated for an act of compassion. She has been framed by someone seeking power, and she has lost her job, her safety, and her peace because of lies. Today, that ends. He stepped back from the podium, slightly voice lowering into something softer, yet stronger. Maya taught me that silence can protect, but it can also destroy. Today, I choose not to be silent. He concluded with words that would appear on headlines across the nation before sunset. She did not break me. She held the pieces together. The room descended into stunned applause, hesitant at first, then rising like a wave of catharsis. For the first time in his career, Elias did not feel exposed by vulnerability. He felt freed by it. And, miles away, watching a live stream from her tiny apartment, Maya covered her trembling mouth with both hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, someone had told the world she was worth protecting. The applause from the press conference still echoed faintly in Elias's ears long after he stepped off the stage, but the sound barely registered. The only thought that filled his mind now was Maya. He left the building without waiting for the board, without acknowledging the reporters shouting questions, without speaking to anyone except the driver who opened the car door. "Take me to her." His voice was quiet but firm, carrying the weight of a man who finally understood what he could lose if he hesitated even one more second. The city rushed past the window while his pulse thudded in a steady rhythm that felt like purpose. When the car pulled up to Maya's apartment building, he was out before the driver had fully stopped. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and warm bread, and the floor creaked under his steps. He knocked once, gently, afraid of startling her. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the lock turned. Maya opened the door slowly. Her eyes were red. Her hair was tied back loosely as if she had been pulling her hands through it all night. She was still wearing the same clothes from the day before. When she saw him, she sucked in a small breath, a sound so quiet it hurt more than any shout. Elias spoke first. "May I come in?" She stepped aside without a word. The apartment was small but warm, filled with soft colors and quiet corners. The kind of space built not for comfort but for survival. She stood near the kitchen counter, holding the edge like it anchored her. Her voice was faint. "I saw everything." He nodded. "I wanted you to." She shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. "You could have denied it. You could have said nothing. You could have protected yourself. Why would you risk everything for me?" He stepped closer, leaving a respectful space between them. "Because you never asked for anything. Because you never demanded from me. Because you never tried to hurt me. And because I cannot lose you to lies spoken by people who do not know you." Her eyes softened and she looked away, blinking back tears. He let the silence settle before speaking again. "Maya, I want to make something very clear. You did nothing wrong. You did not deserve any of what happened to you. And you are not alone. Not anymore." She swallowed and her voice trembled. "I do not know how to believe that yet." He nodded. "I know. And I am not asking you to believe it in this moment. I am asking for the chance to show you." She looked up, finally meeting his gaze fully. He was not the distant CEO she had once cleaned for. He was a man standing with his heart open in a way that felt both unfamiliar and profoundly right. He took a slow breath. "Maya, I am going to step down temporarily from Ward Dynamics." She stared at him, stunned. "What? Why?" "Because I need to learn how to live without hiding in silence, and I cannot heal in a place built on the habits that broke me." He swallowed. "I want to move back to Seattle, live in a quieter place. Somewhere I can rebuild. Somewhere I can actually breathe." Her lips parted slightly in surprise. He continued, his voice low and earnest. "I do not want you to clean my home. I want you to share it. The words hung in the air, gentle but powerful. Maya stepped back as if the ground had shifted. "Elias, that is too much. I do not want to be saved by anyone. I do not want to depend on someone out of pity." He took one careful step toward her. "This is not pity, this is choosing. Choosing peace, choosing honesty, choosing someone who makes the world bearable, someone who understands the quiet." She pressed a hand to her eyes, overwhelmed. "I do not know if I can give you what you deserve." Elias closed his eyes briefly. "Then let me show you what I deserve." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She hesitated, then took it. Her hands shook as she unfolded the document. It was a donation confirmation. Ward Dynamics Kidney Support Fund, dedicated to Ethan Hart. Her throat tightened. "You did this." "Yes." He kept his voice steady. "Your brother deserves care without you sacrificing every piece of your life." Her eyes flooded again. She whispered, "I never asked for this. I know. That is why it matters." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind outside brushed softly against the windows. Finally, she exhaled a long, trembling breath. Elias stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maya, I have spent years living in silence because I feared the sound of pain. But your silence is different. Your silence is peace." She lifted her eyes. "And I want to build a life where neither of us has to be quiet to feel safe." Maya let the words sink in, her breath shaky. Elias held out a hand, not touching her, just offering. Not demanding, not taking, just offering. After several long seconds, she placed her hand in his. Her fingers curled weakly but deliberately. Elias's breath escaped in something like relief. She looked at him through tears. "I am scared." He nodded slowly. "So am I. But we can be scared together." She let out a soft, trembling laugh, the first he had heard from her since the nightmare began. He guided her gently toward the living room, and they sat on the edge of the small couch. Neither spoke for a moment. The quiet was full, but not heavy. Finally, Maya whispered, "What happens now?" He looked at her with a certainty he had never felt before. "Now we take one step forward at a time. We heal. We breathe. We live like people, not shadows." He hesitated, then added with vulnerability so raw it almost broke his voice. "And if one day you allow it, we love." She closed her eyes, letting the truth of the moment wrap around her like warmth for the first time in years. When she opened them, she spoke a sentence that would become the foundation of everything that followed. "Then, let us learn how to live without fear." He nodded. Together. Outside, the sky cleared and a soft breeze whispered against the apartment window, faint enough that she almost missed it. A sound like a memory, like something waiting to become real. She looked at Elias, and for the first time she believed a life beyond survival might truly exist. 1 year later, Seattle breathed a different kind of air. Softer, calmer, almost as if the city itself had taken a long exhale after holding tension for too many years. On a quiet hillside neighborhood overlooking the water stood a small, modern home of clean lines and warm wood touches. Nothing extravagant, nothing cold, nothing like the 70-floor glass prison Elias Ward once lived in. Inside that home, something gentle was happening. Something that did not feel like the aftermath of chaos or the rebuilding after disaster, but simply the natural unfolding of two lives learning how to exist without fear. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft stripes across the living room floor where Elias stood barefoot, holding a mug of tea. He wore a simple sweater and looked nothing like the CEO whose name had dominated national headlines the year before. His shoulders were looser, his jaw no longer clenched, his breathing steady, and, more than anything, his eyes carried warmth instead of the brittle emptiness that once hid beneath polished composure. Behind him came light footsteps. Maya appeared wearing a faded t-shirt and comfortable leggings, hair braided loosely down her back. She smiled when she saw him, the kind of smile that lived not in the lips, but in the eyes. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice still gentle, but never constrained. "Morning," he replied, and the ease between them felt earned, forged in fire and rain, and every quiet moment they used to stitch their lives together. Maya walked past him toward a small wooden box on the shelf. With careful hands, she opened it, revealing the wind chime she had once gifted him in the early days when he could barely speak without fear of being yelled at or judged. The chime was slightly worn, its wooden edges smooth from time, but its sound still light, still pure, still theirs. She hung it by the window beside a small pot of lavender and stepped back. The breeze drifted through the open window, stirring the strands of chime into motion. A soft, delicate sound filled the room like the whisper of hope. Elias closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. It had been a long road, making peace with memories that once clawed at his mind. Therapy had become a weekly part of his life. So had long walks with Maya, quiet dinners, simple routines, and moments of silence that no longer frightened him. He turned to her. "It sounds different here." Maya tilted her head. "How so?" He stepped closer, eyes gentle. "Here, it sounds like the beginning of something, not a reminder." She felt her throat tighten not with sadness but with gratitude. "You did that," she whispered. "You changed your life." He shook his head. "No, we did. And it was true." Their healing had been a shared journey measured not in grand gestures but in hundreds of small choices. Some days were hard, some nights heavy, but they had kept going. Both of them choosing presence over avoidance, choosing truth over silence, choosing each other over fear. A door opened down the hall and Ethan, Maya's younger brother, now healthier and stronger, stepped out stretching. He grinned when he saw them. "Morning." Maya smiled. "Morning. Are you ready for your appointment?" He nodded enthusiastically, much more energetic than the fragile boy she had once worked 3 jobs to support. "I feel good. The doctor said my numbers keep improving." Laya stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "And they will keep improving. You have a whole team behind you now." Maya felt emotion rise again, thinking of how different this year could have been, if not for Elias speaking the truth in front of the world. Ethan went to the kitchen to grab breakfast, and Maya looked at Elias. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Elias cupped her cheek briefly, brushing his thumb near the corner of her jaw with a tenderness he could never have shown a year ago. "You do not thank people for loving you. You just let them." She leaned forward, resting her forehead lightly against his, and the moment stretched warm and unhurried. Later that afternoon, while Ethan was at his kidney checkup, Maya walked with Elias along the waterfront. Families passed by, couples strolled hand in hand, the city alive with weekend ease. They paused at a small overlook where the water shimmered beneath the pale sun. Elias rested his hands on the railing, eyes drifting across the horizon. Maya watched him quietly. He had once looked out at the world like a man bracing for impact. Now he looked like someone learning how to live in it. She asked softly, "Do you miss any of it? The company, the power, the spotlight?" He shook his head. "Not the power, not the spotlight, but I miss building things. I miss creating something meaningful." Maya nodded. "Then build something new, something that matters to you." His eyes lifted to her. "Something that matters to us," he corrected gently. She smiled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded brochure. Maya looked down. "A community mental health program." She glanced up, surprised. "You want to fund this?" "Not fund. Build," he said. "A place for people like me, people who have lived with fear and silence, people who think asking for help makes them weak." She felt her chest warm. "Elias, this is beautiful." He exhaled slowly. "I think it could help people, and I think it is time I give back in a way that feels real." They stood quietly together, looking at the faint ripples on the water. A soft breeze blew by, carrying the distant sound of a dog barking and children laughing. Normal sounds, everyday life sounds. Once they would have startled him. Now they simply folded into the world around him. As evening settled, they returned home. Maya opened the door, and a faint breeze from outside stirred the wind chime. The soft, gentle notes drifted through the room, filling every corner with the quiet promise of peace. Elias stood behind her, wrapping his arms loosely around her waist, resting his chin near her shoulder. He whispered, "Please do not raise your voice." She smiled, eyes soft, warm, steady. "I will not," she replied. "But even if I ever did, you are safe now." The wind chime rang again. Its sound delicate as hope, resilient as love. They stood together watching the Seattle sky turn from blue to gold to the deep purple of dusk. A year ago, they had been two people surviving separately. Now they were something else, something whole, something shared, something beautiful that had grown from the quiet. If you are still here listening to the final chime of their story, then thank you, truly. Stories like this one are not just about romance or pain or healing. They are about the quiet things we carry and the gentle moments that save us without anyone noticing. And if you felt something while following Maya and Elias through the darkness and into the light, then maybe a part of their journey lives in you too. Before you go, I want to ask you something simple but powerful. Have you ever loved someone quietly, not loudly or dramatically, just quietly, in the way you show up, in the way you listen, in the way you hold their hope even when they cannot? If you have, tell me in the comments. I would love to read your stories because this channel is not just a place for fiction, it is a place where people who understand love find each other across thousands of miles. And if you felt connected to Maya's strength or Elias's healing, let me know where you are watching from. Every time someone writes Seattle or Texas or Toronto or Trinidad or London or Georgia or anywhere at all, it reminds me how many hearts are out there experiencing these stories together. Also, if this story held your attention, if it made you feel seen or made you breathe a little softer, then take a moment to like this video. It helps the story reach more people who may need something gentle tonight. And do not forget to subscribe because we tell stories like this every week. Stories of billionaires who heal in silence. Maids who carry strength in their softness. Cowboys who find home after years of drifting. Single parents who rebuild life from scattered pieces. People who love in ways the world often overlooks. And if you want to support the channel even more, leave a comment with the name of your city. I love seeing where everyone is watching from. It feels like tiny lights appearing across a map reminding us that even when life gets heavy, kindness still connects us. There is one more thing. If you could choose one moment from this story that touched you the most, which one would it be? Elias whispering, "Please do not raise your voice in the rain." Maya placing her hand over his trembling one in the boardroom. The wind chime ringing softly at the very end. Tell me below. Your comments help shape the next stories on this channel because every story here belongs to all of us. And if you want more long, healing, slow-burn love stories with twists and emotional undulation, just say, "More please," and I will know you want another journey like this one. For now, thank you for spending this time with me and with them. May your night be gentle, may your heart be light, and may you always remember that something beautiful can happen after years of silence.